Hi, everyone, and thank you for attending our World Homocystinuria Awareness Day panel. My name is Danae Barkey. I'm the Executive Director of HC&U Network America, as well as a patient living with classical homocystinuria. Today, I would like to thank all of you for attending and for our panelists and for Ben for hosting. We also would like to take and thank our World Homocystinuria Awareness Day sponsor, Syntys Bio, for their generous donation helping make this special day possible. This afternoon will look like this. We will be hearing from our panel, which Ben will moderate, and then from there we will open the Q&A, and then I will come on and thank everyone, and then add closing comments, and then Grace will come on and announce our raffle winners. And from there, then, again, I will come back on and close things out. So stay tuned here, and we are getting things started. So again, thank you for attending today's World Homocystinuria Awareness Day panel. I am proud to share today with our panel, our host, Ben Massengale, and our three panelists who will be sharing their journey of what it's like living with homocystinuria and their diagnostic odysseys as well. This year's theme is World Homocystinuria Awareness Day. Hope connects us around the world. And so for many patients, homocystinuria, they may be the only patient in their state and even in their own country. We connect with patients all over that have never met another patient. And so for them being able to connect, sometime it is a global affair. And today we would like to take and acknowledge those patients and really emphasize the global community that helps provide hope amongst us. So I'm going from here to turn it over to Ben, who can introduce himself and our panelists, and I will hear from you guys later.
Hey everyone, my name is Ben Massengale, and I am a classical HCU patient living in Georgia. I host a podcast called HC&U that's sponsored by HCU Network America. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank HCU Network America for letting me host this event for the second year. I didn't scare them away the first time I did this, so I appreciate the opportunity to be back. And I'd like to thank the panelists as well. We're going to start off by introducing ourselves. So if you wouldn't mind, tell everyone your name, where you're from, your connection to HCU, and specifically the type of HCU you're representing. We can start with Erica.
Good afternoon. Thank you guys for giving me this opportunity to speak on behalf of my family member. My name is Erica Orno. I live in Central Louisiana. I am the paternal aunt to two nephews, Callahan Vizina and Channing Vizina. Both of these, one of my nephews has passed away due to the condition severe MTHFR. However, his younger brother is surviving and thriving with the condition. And so I'm here to talk about that today. Callahan passed away in March of 2023 at the age of 3 months. And his younger brother, Channing, is about a year old now and doing really well. Professionally, I'm a family nurse practitioner, and in my clinic here in Louisiana, we do his lab work. So we're able to help out and check his homocysteine levels and safeguard the lab work also. So.
Thank you. We'll go to Brandon.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brandon Tornes. I'm originally from Green River, Wyoming, but just recently moved to Houston, Texas. My son Mason has cobalamin C. He's 10 years old and he was diagnosed about 7 days old.
Thank you, Brandon. And then we'll go to Brittany.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brittany Hunter. I live in the South Mississippi on the Gulf Coast, and my 7-year-old daughter, Aniston, has classical HCU that was found in newborn screening.
All right, thank you all for that. So the first discussion point that I'd like to bring up, usually our diagnostic journeys are so long and complicated and different. So I want you to think about the time before you got your diagnosis, and I want you to think about when things were happening that kind of set off in your mind that something might not quite be right. And the first question I'd like to ask is, what symptoms did your child display that initially started you thinking that something might not be right and required further investigation? And again, we'll go to Erica first.
Okay, so his mother, my sister-in-law, speaks about after looking back, the first symptom that she noticed that seemed to be abnormal were poor feedings, and Callahan slept all the time to the point that he didn't. She was concerned about the volume of milk that he was consuming. She didn't feel like it was adequate. I think she talks about 2 ounces at about a week old. However, so she did voice the concerns to the pediatrician, but the pediatrician just sort of, with kids, uh, this could be abnormal, but it could also be just normal for him. So the recommendation was just to feed him more frequently, wake him up if needed to feed him. And so she did that. So it really didn't sound off alarms at that point. But one of the other things too we noticed that was sort of strange is he was intolerant to cold temperatures. So if we changed him, he would cry and it looked like he was in pain during the diaper change. And so we feel like that was strange for him too. We also noticed he did not he didn't latch well to breast during breastfeeding attempts. He never could latch, so they were exclusively using bottle to help with that. So those were the subtle differences in symptoms he presented with that didn't really sound alarms initially, and it didn't really trigger an investigation out the gate.
All right, thank you for that, Erica. We'll move to Brandon.
Thanks. So Mason was caught through the newborn blood screenings. Wyoming does all theirs through Colorado, so we didn't notice too much until the day we actually got a call from Children's that something was up with his newborns. And so we got into the pediatrician immediately and got additional labs done to kind of pinpoint which way to go with the metabolic disorder. And everything seemed fine in the pediatrician's office. But once we got into the car, getting ready to go home, my wife was trying to feed Mason, and he was very lethargic and pretty much limp as a noodle. So we marched right back into the pediatrician and took on the next step in our journey after that.
All right, thank you, Brandon. We'll go to Brittany.
Like Brandon was saying, Aniston was caught during newborn screening, so I really didn't notice any symptoms right off the bat. I received the phone call when she was about 2 weeks old saying that they didn't get enough blood for one of her tests, and they needed me to bring her in to be retested at the state health department. And being a new mom, I didn't really think too much of it, but that's when the next day they called me and said that they thought she might have homocystinuria, and so we had to go to the state university hospital to be actually diagnosed. But she really did not have any symptoms. I remember them scaring me with a bunch of symptoms, like if she was not eating or sleeping too much, too hot, too cold. But really, we didn't notice any of those symptoms.
All right, thank you for that. Erica, let me ask you this, and then we'll go to the other two, because I'm sure their answer may be different since they were caught through newborn screening. But how many doctors did you initially have to see, and what were the reactions when you voiced concerns to those doctors?
Okay, so here in Louisiana, we do newborn screening for MTHFR, but in the case of the two boys, it did not trigger a positive for both of them. What actually triggered an investigation was Lainey was going to a 2-month well baby visit. And at that appointment, they took his temperature and found that he was hypothermia with a temperature of 92 degrees Fahrenheit. And so then they immediately rushed him to the local hospital's ER. In ER, they found him to be limp or hypotonia. There, so the first stop was, so essentially, I think the total hospital was 3 hospitals total for him. But from our local hospital ER, they worked him up as though he was having an infection, and that was the root cause of the temperature. They did a spinal tap. They found him to be lethargic, and so they recommended transfer to a higher level of care, in which case they transferred him to an ER and pediatric hospital about 45 minutes away from home. From there, they did brain scans. Okay, so that was like one hospital there. Going on to the second hospital, they did ER workup as well, CTs, MRI with and without contrast. For that particular imaging, they put him to sleep, in which case after that, he lost his ability to breathe. They found in the imaging he had brain atrophy. And so they tried to extubate him from there, and they kept trying. He tried to wean him off of the oxygen support, except he didn't have the ability or the tone to breathe on his own. That was Friday he was admitted, and by Monday we were being transferred to the final and third hospital for genetic workup. So I think we're talking about at least six doctors at this point. And here in Louisiana, genetics was in New Orleans, which is probably the highest level of care we have here. And to my understanding, and well, I see her work now. She works a lot of televisits and covers most of Louisiana. So that's where we started to do the genetic workup, was in New Orleans. So that was our third hospital and second ICU for pediatrics.
All right, thank you for sharing that. Brandon and Brittany, so you guys got your diagnosis through newborn screening. So you've said that you didn't see symptoms really before you got a diagnosis because you got it so early. So can you talk a little bit about the symptoms that your child has faced, like after receiving the diagnosis?
So for Mason, we really watch for lethargy. That's kind of the main point. If his homocysteine levels are high, that's a big thing for us to watch. But other than that, that's really the big one we focus on.
And Brittany, sorry, I know I'm throwing a curveball at you guys. I had to go a little off script here.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I mean, really, I mean, she hasn't ever displayed any of this said symptoms. Her homocysteine levels have always been under control since finding the diagnosis. But like what Erica was saying, we actually see a doctor in New Orleans that is our genetic doctor. And we started off in Jackson, Mississippi, seeing a doctor there. But then it was recommended that we go to New Orleans because it was closer to us, and that has been such a blessing. The doctor we see over there is amazing and really comforting. So
That's awesome. Brandon, do you mind talking a little bit about the doctors that you saw? Because I know you were in Wyoming, had to go to Colorado. You're in Texas now. So can you talk a little bit about uh, how that kind of affected, Mason's journey?
Yeah. So the pediatrician we had in Wyoming, she was great, but she really didn't have much exposure to any rare metabolic diseases at all. So, she was concerned. She kind of anticipated the worst and gave us the best advice she could give us. And with that, we were life flighted to Children's Colorado. We were greeted by Dr. Weisfeld Adams, who was an amazing doctor who unfortunately passed away a few years ago, but it was very comforting to have him as his doctor, because after we got to know him and researched him a little bit, a lot of his graduate studies and thesis and that kind of thing, and his post when he was a doctor, all his studies were in cobalamin C. So we knew we were in great hands. We were, Denver is about 6 hours away from where we lived. Salt Lake City was 2, they offered us to go to the University of Utah, but with what Dr. Weisfeld Adams had in his background and just the level of care we got, we knew we were going to stay with him and deal with the drive.
All right, thank you for that. So we'll move on to the next discussion point, which is finding a diagnosis. So we're thinking about the early phases of receiving the diagnosis. So Erica, when all of this was happening, were there any misdiagnoses or potential conditions other than severe MTHFR that were discussed with your family?
Initially, so the local hospital ruled out the most common cause of hypotonia and then the temperature dysregulation. They ruled out sepsis infection, but then pretty quickly after that was found to be negative, and they started thinking neurological, and they had actually considered, I believe, stroke. And then once we moved to New Orleans, it was pretty convincing. They had done the amino acid profile, I think, as an arrival to New Orleans, and then that was on a Monday, resulted on the Thursday, and then that's when they got the diagnosis. So I think at this point we were about 7 days in before we got the diagnosis of severe MTHFR and found the homocysteine to be 167, I think it was at the time. But they had considered it's possible that he had a stroke. I do believe they mentioned that a few times. He did have macrocytic anemia, also low folate, low B12. They had actually given him a little bit of blood, but pretty quickly they realized it was either neurological or genetics, or both, and metabolic as well. But that happened in New Orleans.
So I know you said you were at 3 different hospitals. So can you tell us, in their search for a diagnosis, what all tests did the doctors have to run?
Here in our hometown, they had done a spinal tap. They did blood cultures, typical standard blood work. They did rapid testing for infection. And then to the second hospital, they did brain imaging. They had done an EEG looking for brain activity, more blood work, blood gases. I think that was kind of the main ones in Lafayette. And then in New Orleans, they did that amino acid genetic testing. They did more brain scans. Those were the big things. And then that amino acid profile, I think, probably took quite a bit of time to come back. That's part of like the 4-day wait, I think, from the Monday to the Thursday. I'm trying to think if there was anything else we had that I'm leaving out there. They had done an echo, and I think they did find that he had maybe a little hole, but that was kind of insignificant compared to, I think they had narrowed it down pretty much in New Orleans that it was going to be genetics, metabolic. What else? And they had done multiple chest x-rays. They tried to extubate him. He failed twice. At one point we had I think he was trying to take a bottle and they thought he had aspirated, but then They ended up having to re-intubate him because he was still not able to breathe on his own. And it looked like it was aspiration that was part of the issue, but then that's when they realized it was the brain function that was not helping him breathe. Does that answer the question? I think.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay.
So going to Brandon, can you tell us a little bit about what's the timeline for newborn screening? When did you get the call from the doctor that Mason's test came back abnormal? And what were their initial thoughts on that test?
Yep. So we got our results back on day 6 of life. Got a call, I think it was before noon. So we got in pretty quick to his pediatrician. That wasn't too far away. It was in the next town over, it was about 20 miles. So relatively quick. I believe they said the C3 to C6 ratio was off. It's one of those high level markers that can flag an issue, and then further testing from that can narrow it down. And they were able to get labs, whole blood relatively quickly. It was a long wait for us just to try and figure out what was going on. And um, yeah, that's when we were just hanging out. We were released to go home. Figured we'd wait in the car and get him fed, and then grab a couple of things from Walmart and head home. And that's when he went lethargic and went right back in. And luckily, the pediatrician was still there, and got with the children's Colorado doctors they were talking with, and got the life flight set up.
So what was the initial hospitalization like for you guys?
So yeah, so in Colorado, it was kind of lengthy. We were there for 9 days. My wife got on the plane with Mason, and I grabbed our 2.5-year-old daughter and took off in the middle of the night in December to drive through the mountain passes to get to Colorado. Very thankfully, the roads were good and not icy, because it can be very treacherous. But we were also very fortunate. We had friends that lived just north of Denver, and they were willing to take our daughter and hang on to her until we understood what was going on, until our parents could get down there too. But so yeah, he was in the NIC unit for 9 days. When we got there, his homocysteine was very high. I think it was 196. So super high, and pretty much every day they kept giving him doing blood work to understand where his levels were, and got him on betaine and B12 shots. And um, he was struggling a little bit to breathe as well, so they wouldn't let us leave without supplied oxygen. And the other thing, they made sure that we had all the medicines secured with pharmacies where we could get them, and they made sure that we were comfortable giving him his B12 shot as well, which was intimidating. No one ever really wants to have to give anybody a shot, but we pulled through and had some great doctors and nurses teaching us.
So the test that the doctors had to run for Mason, was it just a lot of blood work that they were running, or were there other tests that they ran while you guys were there as well?
That initial 9 days, it was mainly homocysteine and MMA. I'm sure they ran some other ones, but those were like the amino acid panel that Erica talked about. But the homocysteine was the big one they talked with us. He did some other testing later, but just to monitor and make sure things were good.
All right, thank you for that. And then Brittany, would you mind walking us through your timeline of getting that call from newborn screening that something was off?
Yeah, so it was about 2 weeks after Aniston was born. I received that phone call that they said that they didn't have enough blood. Asked me to bring her in the next day, and we did. The very next day, I received a phone call from a nurse saying that they believed that she had something called homocystinuria, and that um, my pediatrician would be calling me to go over what homocystinuria was, but told me not to Google it in the meantime. But of course, I did. And then they said that they would be setting up an appointment for us to drive to Jackson in about 3 days for her to actually be diagnosed if she did have it. Um, it took my pediatrician about 5, 6 hours to actually call me. And at that point, I had already Googled the worst, but he was not reassuring at all. He did not have any knowledge of homocystinuria. He was actually reading from a textbook that was extremely old. He, just gave me the worst case scenario. Basically my child was going to be severely mentally retarded, delayed, and she would have learning disabilities, behavioral problems. She would have a stroke, and also she would die at a young age, and scared me half to death. So then in 3 days, we traveled up to Jackson, Mississippi, where they ran the blood test on her. And we waited probably about 5 hours up there with my husband and my in laws. We all went up there just waiting around. And we were just praying that, maybe the test would come back, negative, that, it was a mistake. But it didn't. We ended up receiving the phone call, and they told us that she did have classical homocystinuria. They asked us to come back in to the doctor, and that's when the doctor there started going over some of, the symptoms and what she actually had. He was kind of a younger doctor, so he didn't have a lot of knowledge either of homocystinuria. And some of the things he told us that, were completely different than what the pediatrician had read to me. He said, that she basically, she wouldn't have to eat anything different. But, she does have a low protein diet. He kind of, he didn't tell us like with the real like truth about it. And then he said that there was a doctor at in New Orleans, Tulane, that he was very knowledgeable of homocystinuria. And since it would only be about 45 minutes from us, he recommended that we go there. So we went there about a week later, and that's when they really gave us reassurance that everything was going to be okay, that they caught it early, that she, was going to follow treatment, and that, it wasn't as scary as what we first were told. That so it was very comforting to go there and hear that type of stuff. But so
Much better news than what you initially got from the pediatrician.
yes, we don't not see him anymore. So
All right, thanks for sharing that. So we'll move on to the next discussion point, which is diagnosis and initial treatment. So thinking about a point after you've gotten your diagnosis, a correct diagnosis, and you're finally starting to get treatment. Erica, we'll go to you. What did doctors initially tell you about your child's condition? What were the first things they said about severe MTHFR?
So she received the diagnosis on Thursday. Um, the doctor said it was a very poor prognosis. Um, in her 20 years working as a geneticist, I think she had 2 cases of severe MTHFR, one of which is breathing with the tracheostomy, 24-hour care, poor quality of life. Second of which, I think my sister-in-law and I were kind of trying to remember that, when did treatment start on that second case. The second one, I believe, is around the age 20 or so, works a part-time job, has some reduced higher level thinking, but otherwise good quality of life, and works a part-time job. She felt that it was very late to be getting this diagnosis. She did not feel that Callahan, it was bad, is basically what she said. This is bad. She knew that we could get the homocysteine down in time, but with the brain atrophy, the lasting and damaging effects, we had no idea what that really meant, how permanent it would be. And the better and bigger question was he going to breathe if we did extubate him, or was he going to require tracheostomy and 24-hour care and poor quality of life, which is kind of the gist of what we understood. It wasn't good. And she said it was rare. We had a lot of confusion about the polymorphism MTHFR versus this genetic mutation and severe MTHFR, which was very confusing, but the prognosis was really bad, and we were under the impression that he would need to have 24-hour care.
All right, thank you for sharing that. Brandon, what did doctors initially tell you about Mason's diagnosis?
For Mason, they didn't sugarcoat it. They told us all the potential things that could happen. They told us he'd very likely be legally blind, because most cobalamin C patients suffer that. Not all. They mentioned cognitive issues, speech delays, a few other things. But I appreciate that. I'd rather know all that up front, so we can plan for the worst and strive for the best. But it was definitely a hard hit emotionally. But they were very patient with us, both the metabolic doctors and ophthalmology, and they took the time to give us time. I remember the day we were told Mason's macula was starting to die, where he was getting macular degeneration. My wife and I sat in that room for probably 30 minutes crying our eyes out, just because of how tragic it was. And they gave us all the time in the world we needed, and they answered all our questions, and can't thank them enough for that.
All right, thanks for sharing that. And then Brittany, we'll go to you. What did doctors initially tell you about HCU?
So when we landed with our current doctor that we have, they, of course, they told us the normal things, but he reassured us that, that was usually in misdiagnosed cases, or, nothing that has been treated from birth. So, they just told us the certain things to look out for, but they really reassured us that things were going to be okay, that, they immediately started her on cystidane, and then testing to see if she was B6 responsive, and then on the low protein metabolic formula. And so, they just, as the time went on, he just, told us it was going to be okay. And just like Brandon said, that day that we saw them, I mean, I just remember sitting there crying for a few hours, just sitting in there in the doctor's office, just crying. And they just let us sit there and cry too. And that was really, comforting. But
I'm glad you mentioned the metabolic formula and low protein diet, because that brings me to my next question. And thank you for sharing that answer, Brittany. Erica, speaking about Callahan or Channing, um, what treatments or therapies, either medications or hands-on therapies, did doctors recommend?
At this point, it was all about getting our hands on and getting it in the hospital. Betaine and Hydrus was the main goal. I think he was 167 initially, and the goal was to try to get it in a safer range closer to 50. I think we had some delay in actually getting the medication in the hospital. And of course, there was talk about insurance allowance, which was wild. I think it took, I think it was 4 days before we could get it in the hospital. The initial dose, I believe, was 250 milligrams twice daily, and he was on, of course, he was intubated on the ventilator / CPAP. They had done also the folinic acid in IV form, And because his tone was still weak and because he couldn't tolerate a bottle while he was intubated, they had placed a nasogastric tube for his breast milk feedings. Else. They had done some other vitamins. I'm trying to think. They were doing B12 in the form of an IM injection. The longer he was on the breathing machine, he started to develop atelectasis, or I'm sure in time it would have developed a full-on pneumonia. So they were doing chest X-rays frequently, and they even did like some breathing treatment through the ventilator. But anyway, the main goal was to try to get his tone up and get him more alert and work in the betaine anhydrous.
All right, thank you for that. Brandon, how about you? What therapies or medications were recommended for Mason?
Yep. So he's on betaine, and that's gone up in dosage as he's grown up. Same with hydroxycobalamin. It's compounded shot, so it's always fun getting insurance to cover it. But he's on leucovorin, and then let's see, and then he's been on and off levocarnitine. Just kind of depends on where his levels have been at. He's not on a protein restricted diet, but we're back on that right now. And then he has been taking N-acetylcysteine. It's an antioxidant, and Dr. Weisfeld Adams was going to do a big study on that with cobalamin C that never got to fruition, but there was no real side effects from it. So he's been on that for quite a long time. But for therapies, obviously TBI and O&M, so learning Braille, learning how to use a white cane, and then took a little bit longer till we realized he had speech issues. So he still does speech therapy, and he did PT and OT in Wyoming, but when he got to Texas and they reevaluated him, they were good with his skill level and continue to monitor it. But he graduated from those two. But one of the really cool things in Denver is there's a place called the Anchor Center, and it's basically a school for low vision kiddos pre-kindergarten. And so we would go there, tie it in with our appointments, and that was amazing because we met lots of other families and people with vision issues and vision specialists, and really learned a lot with that.
All right, awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And then, Brittany, apart from the metabolic formula and the low protein diet, which I'm very familiar with, did the doctors recommend any other treatments or therapies for your child?
So they recommended vitamin B6 in the first stages, testing out whether or not she was B6 responsive, and she is. So she takes like a liquid vitamin B6 about 2 times a day. I think it's 3.75 milliliters. And then she takes the betaine, like they're talking about. She takes that twice a day, plus her low protein metabolic formula, and then her low protein diet, which she started out with, I want to say 4 grams of protein when we first introduced food to her. And now she is actually up to 10 grams of protein. So that's exciting that she's able to start having a little bit more, playroom throughout the day, especially as she's growing and being a lot hungrier. But so and then, like as she stays away from meats and dairy and all those things. So
It was always my favorite when you went to the doctor and they said that you got to have a higher protein intake. That was
yeah,
always my question every time I went was, can I have more
yes.
protein? So,
Yes, that's what I always say. I'm like, can we test her? Can we push her? And so I think she's probably gone over it sometimes. So, can we see if that's okay that we're doing it? So it's exciting.
all right. And then the last question for this discussion point. Were there any things that you had tried or the doctors had tried before landing on the final diagnosis that you or the doctors decided to stop once you got the diagnosis? And if the answer is If you don't have an answer, not applicable, then you can just say that. But we'll go to Erica first.
Okay, this one's a little harder for me to answer, and I did speak to my sister-in-law about it, and it is a little bit unapplicable to his case. But if she had to answer that, it would be kind of laying off the every 2 hour feedings, because at that point they knew what was causing the decrease or the poor feedings. And then also another thing that was recommended for Channing, who is living with the condition today, they do recommend working with speech and occupational therapy to facilitate the development of his speech today.
All right, thank you for that. And Brandon, how about you?
Nothing really for us. It's been pretty straightforward.
All right, and Brittany?
The same, nothing really.
All right, so we'll move to our last discussion point. So I want you to think about post-diagnosis to now. So how long after you received your diagnosis were you connected with a patient group like HCU Network America, either through the doctor pointing you in that direction or Facebook searching or Googling? Like, how long did it take you to find these groups that could provide support? Erica, we'll start with you.
Okay, this is kind of a long answer, but it took us about 3 months after Callahan passed away to even learn about the existence of a HCU network. And it was honestly, I feel like it was a miracle. So about 3 months after his passing, received a text message from my sister-in-law, who she's not one who calls much. She texts more often, and it was about 5:36 a.m. in the morning, and I get a message that says, "Are you up?" on I think it was a Thursday work day. And so immediately I knew that was something serious. So I call her and I'm like, "What's going on?" And she says, "I'm pregnant." And my heart sank because I was grieving, and I was excited because we're all grieving. Except she was upset and devastated and basically overwhelmed with fear that this could all happen again, that this next child would be in the same state or suffer the same condition and ultimately pass away like his brother. So I asked her, I said, "Let's go talk to a priest. Let's go get some guidance." And she was like, "No, I'd like to talk to another family that's living with this condition. I would like a support system." And so desperation, I called the geneticists and I called their office and I said, "Listen, I need to talk. Is there any support systems around here? Are there any resources for us?" And so the answer I got was, there are no support systems here in the States, that I would have to speak to another family in another country. I felt defeated. Of course, we were scared, and honestly, I was angry that that's all I got. I may have even told them that I was going to be seeking a second opinion, because at this point I felt like we were on our own and alone. So at that point I used my anger as motivation to start researching better. And at this point we had not found any literature that described his condition of severe MTHFR. We found the polymorphism. There was plenty of information about the polymorphism, MTHFR, which is only mild symptoms and not lethal. So I took to the genetic test that he had done, and I did citation tracking of the articles that were referenced on the genetic test. On that test, it referred to the condition as homocystinuria and severe MTHFR severe. So I began searching that. From there, I found information on Medscape and scholarly articles. And then it described his condition accurately, the microcephaly, the hypotonia, the the neurological deficits, all the things. Like it sounded like him. The good news was that the studies indicated that early intervention led to better prognosis and looked promising. And so I sent them over to my sister-in-law. I'm like, listen, look at this. I said, we are going to reach out to the corresponding authors in the studies, and we're going to seek their advice. And sure enough, she emailed them, and shortly thereafter, these geneticists overseas were emailing us back saying, listen, early intervention is the way to go, and these kids they'll do better neurologically. From there, I took to social media using the correct search terms, homocystinuria and severe MTHFR, and I came across Grace Talbert's documented videos of little Corson. And we were just over the moon excited to see that this child looked like our boy. And we reached out to her. She emailed us back, and I think she even verbally called us, and it was a Sunday. And from there, we got connected to HC&U Network. We met Danae. We had meetings with the family in Australia, who they gave us hope. They gave my sister-in-law the answers that she was looking for. It was awesome. And I also met another, I believe Brittany. I believe Brittany's is it Colorado? Anyway, the personal testimonies that she was looking for that showed that this could be okay and he could survive.
That was a long journey, but I'm glad that you finally got connected with people that understand, because that makes a huge difference. All right, Brandon, how about you? How long did it take to find a community like HC&U Network America?
So the doctors were pretty engaged with several of the rare disease communities. So they set us up with info for Facebook groups and stuff like that, which my wife got signed up with, a little bit with OAA. But it wasn't, part of it took us a while too, because we were trying to readjust life. We were scared to death to miss any doses of medication. And so we took a little bit of time just getting our lives to the new normal. But I think it was maybe 4 years ago, our Colorado doctor told us about Brittany Park and the HC&U, and we reached out to her and that's when we started getting involved a little bit more. But one thing I do have to bring up is the new patient diagnosis guide that the HC&U has. I think that's just a phenomenal tool for anybody new to this journey.
All right, thank you for that. And then how about you, Brittany?
So I think it was probably about 2 weeks after Aniston was diagnosed. I have a really hard time remembering that time period, especially being a new mother and getting hit with this rare genetic disorder. But I believe it was one of my friends who she started doing a bunch of research and searching around on Facebook, and she is the one that stumbled across the HC Network America and sent it to me. And I immediately joined. And I mean, I cannot remember when, but I know it was very early on that Danae and me connected. Aniston was maybe only 2 months old, and from there I just started, asking her questions left and right, about this and that, and so, but it was very early on whenever I joined the community.
All right, thank you for that. And then I've got two more questions. And this next question is one that I ask every person that I interview on the podcast, and I think it's one of the most important questions that I could ask you. What advice would you give to newly diagnosed families? And we'll start with Erica.
I believe your tuition is, even though it's a little voice that you're questioning, is something going on, even if it doesn't make sense. You have to listen to it. Because I think that's what she was saying, like there was something off, and it wasn't, and I don't blame the pediatrician, because these conditions are rare and our testing doesn't, it's as good as testing is, and it's not perfect. Seek education, seek, listen to your intuition and dig, ask the questions, and it's okay to ask for testing. And then I think it's interesting how some geneticists are connected to HC&U Network and others aren't familiar. But I think what we learned from this, that being connected has been very helpful and life-saving here.
All right, thank you for that. And how about you, Brandon?
Got a few things. First one is try to take notes when you're in the doctor's office. They bombard you with information, and it's for us. It was always good to take notes and ask questions. Very fortunate, I believe metabolic doctors want to make sure you're taken care of, so they'll take the time to answer any questions you got. Another one is, don't hold back from experiencing life. There's a lot of great things you can do. You may have to do them a little bit differently, but that is not a reason to hold you back. You can still do anything you put your mind to. And I know one guy, he's doing some phenomenal things, traveled probably almost all over the world, and he's got cobalamin C just like Mason, and he doesn't let anything hold him back. It's amazing. And the third one is, don't forget about any other kids you might have. Our daughter's a little bit older, so she went to every metabolic appointment. She went to the children's hospital and seen, tons of kiddos in worse shape than Mason. She's a great big sister and always, looks out for him and cares about all the other kids. And that experience she had, it's traumatic for her too. So you just can't forget about those kids too.
All right, thanks for sharing that. And then Brittany.
So, yeah, just join the support groups, reach out, just ask questions, just like they said, ask tons of questions, even if you feel like you're just constantly just, asking the same things over and over again. It's not the end of the world. There are others just like you out there that are living their lives just like it. Yes, it may not be the normal life that you thought you were going to have, but it's just a different journey. That and like Brandon was saying, that don't forget about your other children. That's one thing that our doctor, he's kept asking us after we had Aniston, when we would have another one, and we were just so scared at first, because what if she has it too, or what if our other baby has it? And he told us, don't worry about it. If she does, then you'll know how to handle it and it will be okay. So it took us about 3 years, and then we do have another little girl who she does not have HC&U. And so there are the chances that you may not have another child with it. So don't let it scare you. I know some of the other diagnoses are kind of scarier than just classical HC&U, but we still were scared to have another child, because what if? But just join the support groups. That's what I can say. That's what's really helped me. Just feeling connected to others that go through the same thing, because it's hard. Nobody around you really knows what you're going through. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that leads to my last question. I want to dig into that just a little bit. So my last question to you is, how has finding a connection to others through a community like HC&U Network America given you and your family hope? And we'll go to Erica.
I thought about how I would answer this question. I think one sentence answer was it gave us life. And my brother and sister-in-law were so scared, to the point of, I don't, as Brittany was just saying, I don't think having future children was going to be an easy task for them. And I think at this point they are talking about future children. And so they are less scared. And so it's given us love. I mean, it's given us a brand new baby and future children. It gave us hope back. We're still grieving Callahan's loss, but this has helped us heal. And then it gives her the courage to just do what it takes to maintain this illness moving forward and maintain normalcy for everyday living.
Thank you for sharing that. And Brandon, we'll go to you.
I'd say it's definitely refreshing having support groups that you can talk to and vent to and just someone else that understands what you're going through. But for us, we definitely get hope knowing that there's just phenomenal things Mason can do. Nothing can hold him back. Just like I mentioned, our one buddy, he's gone to Dubai, traveled all over the US on his own. He's had his CNI dog and stuff, but it's just seeing that gives us hope and inspires us that we can do anything we want to do.
All right, awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And then finally, we'll go to Brittany.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the hope that, Aniston is not alone, or, that she can do what she would like to do. It's not going to hold her back, or, if, moving forward with treatments and, finding new things. And it's, I guess, giving us hope that we're not, that we're not alone in this, that there are people out there that we can lean on if anything happens. And so.
All right. Thank you for that. Before I turn it back over to Danae, I just want to thank all of the panelists again. It takes a lot of courage and vulnerability to share the stuff that you guys have shared. But it's one of the most beneficial things that our community has is hearing from people who have experienced this. So thank you all for doing that. I appreciate it, and I've enjoyed our conversation. And I'll turn it back to Danae.
Thank you, everyone, for the amazing conversation. It's been incredible. And like Ben, thank you for your vulnerability and your honesty and sharing your experiences. It can be hard and it's very emotional. And so we have one question. And so anyone else who has additional questions, there's still time to submit them here. But Brittany, there was a question for you that came in. The person who sent it, they have a son with classical HC&U and he's 15 months old. And as she says, as Aniston has gotten older, has she had any symptoms or issues because of HC&U?
No, Aniston has not had any symptoms as she's gotten older. We've gone and we have gotten her heart checked recently, just so we have a benchmark to check her in the next couple of years to see if there's been any issues. Her eyes were recently checked really well too, so we would have that. But so far, she's going to turn 8 soon, and we have not had any symptoms whatsoever from having classical HC&U.
Thank you. That's really what we would hope, is that early diagnosis and detection and treatment can save our children from the progression that can happen. And so I don't have any other questions, so I'm going to thank
Danae, there were a couple in the chat.
Thank you. The Q&A box is covering the chat on my screen. It says, as parents, have you all had genetic testing as well? So I guess that is a good question. Erica, did your sister-in-law and I guess it would be your brother, have they had genetic testing since the diagnosis, or?
They did, but both carrier status, nothing really contributing more than that.
Brittany or Brandon, have either of you had?
Yep. For us, they tested us probably a month after we got out of Children's Colorado, and just really to confirm that we were both carriers, make sure it was the specific cobalamin C gene defect that Dr. Weisfeld Adams thought it was.
Um,
No, me and my husband have not had the testing done. Just insurance, wouldn't cover it, and it's costly. Um, we just took advantage of us knowing that our first daughter had HCU, and when they did the newborn screening, they made sure to do the test twice right after. So we could double check or triple check whether or not she had it. And she is just a carrier of HCU. So, but we have not had it done.
and then I think this is the last question, unless if another one pops in here. Brandon, would you be able to share how old Mason is?
Yep. Mason's 10. He's just about to get out of 4th grade.
And Brittany, how old is Aniston one more time?
She's 7.
Okay.
And she's going into the 2nd grade and just had superintendent honor roll. So we're really proud of her.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing to think like how far some of the like families have come. I think about, we have Aniston's story on our website from when she was a baby. I think she was 1 year old when you first shared, and how far your story has come. And I think about, what's to come for Mason, and it's exciting. And so being able to kind of have that like landing place for the initial story and to watch their growth, it's truly amazing as a community leader to be able to witness that. And so I'm going to end it here. We had no additional questions, but I do want to thank everyone. I'm going to promote Grace. I'm hoping she's ready for us here, to a panelist, and she is going to announce our raffle winners. Hopefully this, all right.
Hello. Just making sure I'm doing this right.
You need it.
Let's see.
Should be able to
Shares.
share your screen.
Okay. It's been a while since I've done that.
All right.
Is it showing?
It says it's showing that you're sharing your screen, but it's not sharing your.
Let's see.
There we go.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so yes, we're about to announce the winners for the raffle. I'm super excited for the turnout and to see our winners here. Thank you all for those that bought raffle tickets, donated, shared. There was a lot of sharing going on with this. We're so grateful for that. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with the HC&U shirt and the Amazon gift card. Let's see, it should just pop up. Okay, so our first winner for that is June Anderson. Our next one, we have the 50/50 raffle. Draw winner. And we have Holly for our 50/50 raffle. The signed Bears jersey and the picture. We have Lewis for the winner for that one. Now we have our Kendra Scott jewelry and the homemade blanket by Diane. We have Liz Carter for that one. Our Cane's basket and the Walmart gift card. Holly is the winner for that one. I'm going to do the family adventure last since that's our big ticket item. This is the inspirational veggies and the Home Depot gift card. We have June Anderson for that one. And for a big ticket item, the family adventure to the Great Wolf Lodge. We have Linda Linda for that one. And so that's all of our winners here. I'm gonna stop share and bring it back.
So I want to thank everyone who had purchased a raffle ticket or donated. This was a really exciting year for us. This was the first year that we have been able to successfully complete our goal for World Homocystinuria Awareness Day. Grace, do you know how much approximately we took in?
We raised last it was at like 5,600, I believe.
Okay. And to let everyone know that this will stay open for a couple more days if you would like to donate. All donations and proceeds from the World Homocystinuria Awareness Day raffle and donations, they're being used to offset travel scholarships for families to attend our 2026 conference in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in June 2026. Not June, July 2026. And so we will be opening scholarship applicants later this year when we open registration. So we would really love to be able to offer more to families. Last year, in 2024, we were able to provide 10 scholarships to families, and it allowed them to attend the conference and not have to deal with the hotel fees, and some covered their planes tickets as well. So we really appreciate the generous donations of those who participated. And again, I want to thank everyone for attending and for our wonderful panelists, and also again to our World Homocystinuria Awareness Day sponsor, Syntys Bio. You can learn more about them and their program on their website, syntysbio.com. And thank you, everyone. We hope you join us again in the future. Please follow us on social media and subscribe to our email for future events. Thank you.